Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today, we welcome my good friend, Kevin Hourigan. He, at Bayshore Solutions, merged with good friend Mark's company, Spinutech. How did they make this happen? They met through YPO. They were peers who got to see under the hood of their two companies and shared transparently the journey of entrepreneurship with each other. They decided to meet and spend some time together. And between that rapport building, knowledge sharing, they expanded this collaboration to include their leadership teams. Their leadership team started interacting, sharing knowledge and experiences of how to create the best-in-class digital agency, and a natural progression happened where they said, does 1 + 1 = 3? Kevin walks us through what it took to evaluate that opportunity and what the merged entity of Spinutech is able to provide to its clients, team, and shareholders. It's a wealth of knowledge for those who are actively thinking the M part of M&A. Let's dive in. Kevin, thank you for joining me, my friend.
Thanks, Peter. Look forward to it.
Okay, this is the story that every business at one point is going to experience, and even if they don't do what you did, they've probably thought about it. So quickly, for the listener, give them some background, not on the current agency you're in, on your career, but led to where you're at today.
Yeah, Peter, thanks for having me join you. So I started originally building three-page websites for $500 a few decades ago, and built a brand in Tampa and expanded into Denver, Colorado called Bayshore Solutions. And we went from building three-page websites to becoming what I call an end-to-end digital agency over the course of a little over 20 years. And a good portion of our team designed, developed, hosted, and managed and maintained websites. And another good portion of our team did the digital advertising tactics that originally started with SEO and then paid media, social media, email marketing, and so on and so forth. But we sought out to be a great end-to-end digital partner for our clients, not only supporting their websites or their digital marketing, but being a partner who could offer both services and help them hold one strategy, one execution, one measurable under one roof with the proven methodology. And had a great, joyful career doing that.
Yeah, and you are, when I think of Kevin, I think of high energy networker, meeting a bunch of people constantly in organizations, in groups, learning from others. How did that help you create your agency? And how did that ultimately lead to the Spinutech opportunity?
Yeah, no, Peter, good question. I think network is a component of it, but I think it really goes back to more of a core of how do you learn? And,
Mm.
I think there's so much value in different ways you could learn. You could read a lot, you can listen a lot, things of that nature. You could do that. But sometimes I find some value in learning from others' experiences as well. And often you get those experiences in being in environments and where people are encouraged to share their experiences. And a lot of those have been in different CEO peer organizations. So I was involved in Renaissance Executive Forum at one point. I was involved in what was called Tech at one point, which is now called Vistage. But ultimately, those were stepping grounds, if you will, to an organization called YPO, or a Young Presidents Organization. And then in other groups, Peter, you and I met through Digital Mastermind. And I've been involved and still involved today with a group facilitated by Drew McClellan with the Agency Management Institute. I've just always wanted to have an opportunity to learn from others' experiences. That would be in the industry, but I've also wanted to get an opportunity to learn outside the industry. And so I belong to other organizations. I'm in the Tampa Bay market. I'm a member of the CEO Council of Tampa Bay CEO Council, active in the Tampa Chamber, the Tampa Ad Tech, Tampa Bay Technology Forum. These were all environments in where I could learn a little bit outside of the digital agency world to get some other viewpoints. But when it comes to the side of the networking side of that, Peter, I learned very early on I didn't want to just be a member of these organizations. I wanted to be an active contributor of these organizations. And so very quickly on, I would ask to see if there's some ability to serve at the board level. And therefore, I thought I was one having a requirement. I had to go because I was on the board. And so it wasn't an option as a member. Now you really made a bigger commitment than just being a member. Two, you did get a lot more introductions as a board member and exposure to people at that level And serving on the board, you've now got an opportunity to see how other people make decisions for an organization they serve, not just your own. And so when you're on the board, you got to make fiscal decisions, you got to make leadership decisions, you got to make
Yep.
strategy decisions. And, you get a bunch of entrepreneurs in a room serving a board, a not for profit board or something like that. And again, lots of not for profits. I've been many, many years with the American Heart Association, many others, but I've always actively served on those boards, and that's where some of the networking came about. Is you really start to spend a lot more time in a more intimate arrangement serving on the board than just being a member. So, long
Yeah.
answer to the question, but networking is really a byproduct of wanting to learn and get ideas in how to optimize the performance of our agency through the experiences of others.
So I heard Tampa Bay Chamber of Commerce. I think you were what, technology leader of the year in Tampa at one point.
Yeah, I got the same year, I the marketing leader of the year and the technology leader of the year, and it
Tampa
wasn't about.
Bay American Advertising Federation.
Yes,
You're
yes.
everywhere, Kevin.
But the intent was, as we were building a MarTech company, we were building a digital advertising agency, and part of it was on the web tech side, and part of it was on the marketing side. To be very active in the Tampa Bay Technology Council and very active in the Tampa Bay Ad Federation and things of that nature, and be recognized in the same year as being the leader of the Tampa Bay Technology Forum and as a marketer of the year, it just validated the brand promise I was trying to create, that we really were an integrated MarTech company.
For
And the
sure.
curriculum that I learned in the ad tech side and that side was different than the curriculum I was learning in the technology side. But as an agency, we were trying to be the master of both. And so
Yeah.
it was intentional to be able to get very active in those two different disciplines and try to perfect a Martech strategy that really didn't have. We were on the pioneer side of creating a Martech strategy, and that's where the intention of learning from those experiences came from.
At this time, Bayshore Solutions was offering a lot of services. What what were you doing that was maybe best in class? Some of the things that made this future conversation with Mark start to progress because you did some things well, and then Mark, who became your business partner, and then Spinutech to the merger, you bought two best in class companies together. So, what does Bayshore do best in class first?
Yes. So Bayshore was what I call an end-to-end digital agency, as was Spinutech. But our DNA came before there was digital marketing services. We were building websites before there were digital marketing services. There's an old saying, you can't change your DNA, right? And so being our DNA came from the website build side of things. We were a company that was known for building more enterprise level, robust requiring websites, and had gotten a lot of platform experience in a few different tech stacks that we became recognizable top partners in a few of those tech stack channels. And so while we provided all digital marketing services and had great SEO practices and paid search practices, things of that nature, the DNA of the company was built before those services were ever institutionalized. And so we brought a really robust, deep tech stack with some significant, brand awareness clients that we had served to date. And so that's what we complemented probably on the better side of things. As an end-to-end digital agency, there's probably more bigger check boxes on complex web there may have been on some aspiringly new digital marketing services that were on the cusp and growing on the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. To double tap on kind of the repetitive opportunity you've described, is you stood on the shoulders of others. You learned from others throughout your entrepreneurial journey, and then you were also fairly transparent. Like you're one of the most authentic, candid, friendly persons I know. And getting you to share makes me feel comfortable sharing with you. Is that how the conversation with your future business partner really started to flower?
Well, one step before that, it's the framework of what that was, and that was YPO. And YPO's tagline, I may not get this 100%, but YPO's tagline is learning through education and experiences. And so in YPO, not much differently than Vistage or Renaissance Executive Forum, it was an opportunity to share a lot of confidential things in an environment where that confidentiality was highly respected, and YPO maybe just adds some fuel to that and some added expectations there. But in YPO, Mark and I were both YPO members. We met through the YPO channel. We became part of a YPO agency members forum. And that's where the framework of a lot of my education comes from the experience share of other agencies. But the requirement there is you have to be comfortable being confidential and sharing some things with. And there's an old saying, the more you put into something, the more you get out of it. And I felt like if you weren't sharing if you weren't sharing the depth of where you really needed to learn from, you probably weren't going to get out of it what you really needed to. But it wasn't only just what I would share or what I would ask or what I would want problem solving for, Peter. In those environments, I think probably the most education I ever received was listening to my forum mates bring their issues to the table,
Mm,
or listen to my forum mates talk about how they were knocking the cover off the ball, so to speak. I certainly had issues that I brought to the table over the number of years that I've been involved in all of that. But I would say learning from someone else's opportunities that they gained from, or watching someone go through some challenging times and looking to see how did they get there and how do you avoid getting there.
yeah.
I have more knowledge gain from living through their experiences without having to live through the school of hard knocks. And school of hard knocks is an expensive, slow journey to go on. It doesn't cost anything but a lot of time and a lot of margin. And,
Yeah.
but sharing is a requirement in a confidential matter. Sharing's definitely a high requirement to get out of it what you can.
Now, you didn't have a small remedial agency. You had built it up to be an established team. I
Right.
think you shared with me, what, 60 people at the point of which when you merged.
Yes. Yeah.
You'd been in the game for a long time.
Yeah.
So this was a mature business having talks with another mature business. And oftentimes you don't always see the vulnerability, the knowledge sharing. Yes, YPO fosters it. Yes, there's rituals and there's communication expectations. It's still reliant on you to open the tent and welcome them in, and it be mutual too. It can't be one-sided. So you talked about it being almost a multi-year rapport building process. Maybe unpack that for the listener because you merged, but it wasn't like we just met in YPO, we were sharing, we're like, "Oh," but actually, yes, because if I remember correctly, you did say that rather early on.
Yeah. No. So, the 1 minute version of how Mark and I first met is um, Mark became a newer member to YPO, and it was announced in an email that Mark had just joined YPO and he owned a digital agency out of Iowa. And I received that email and I just sent him a welcome note to say, "Hey, Mark, my name's Kevin. I own a digital agency out of Florida and in Denver. And if you ever want to meet a fellow YPO or in the digital marketing space, love to set up a 30-minute introductory call." And he wrote back pretty quickly. And we had a huddle pretty quickly. And we'd put 30 minutes on the calendar. And I think we're at like 29 and a half minutes deep into the conversation and we still hadn't got past hello yet. We were just really enjoying the first
Yeah.
29 minutes of the call. I say, listen, I've got a hard stop. He had a hard stop. But I said, I'd love to revisit this. We've got a lot in common. Maybe we should merge. It was completely a joke. It was just completely a joke. But 18 months later, we were business partners without ever really taking that joke and thinking about how we become business partners. It ebbed and flowed a different way. But
Yeah.
just the very first intro to call we ever had, the first 30 minutes we ever met each other, I joked, maybe we should merge. That became a reality 18 months later.
Yeah, I try to teach people that if you have that rapport, that 30-minute conversation that expands, sometimes the question is to the other party, have you thought about selling? Because you like them so much, you want to acquire them. You did the much more peer-to-peer version of that, which
Yeah.
is we
Yeah.
should merge.
Right. Right. Right.
Okay, well, merging is a big thing.
Yeah.
And you had some experience of partnerships in the past and kind of what that could look like. Beyond the honeymoon of getting to know someone and the overlap of the opportunity, how did you start to really figure out, is this someone who the businesses could merge and become partners with towards creating this version of the future that you wanted?
Yeah. No, great question. So again, in some of these peer groups where you spend time with each other to share each other's experiences, format of Renaissance Executive Forum, same with Vistage and YPO, being involved in all three, there's definitely a format where you've got to put your financials in play every month for everybody to see, and they can see how you're trending. And there's definitely a expectation that if you're seeing one of your fellow forum mates, maybe not seeing things that they don't see there, you're meant to be vocal about it. And so in all these formats, it's been helpful for people to see things maybe that I didn't see, being too close to it, and vice versa. And so as Mark and I were in this forum together, we were like any other six others in our forum, learning each other's businesses. And we decided to establish a second meeting outside the other six members. And so we had a huddle at 9 o'clock Eastern time, 9 o'clock Central, every Wednesday morning. And we spent an hour, about an hour together. No one else in our forum was doing it, but we were so enjoying the learning opportunity together. We wanted to
Yeah.
spend more time together. Again, it was never under any vision whatsoever we would ever have a merger conversation. It was just being two healthy forum mates, being able to provide additional insights because our companies were seemed to be so complementary. And as we continued to have those conversations, part of I think some of the drivers is we both received opportunities to bid on work for the same prospect. And here you are, you're sharing open kimono, things about your businesses, but you're both working on it. And very with no thread of anything I had ever said before that I think would come to haunt me. And I think we both knew that we would never violate that. New business didn't mean anything compared to the relationship we had established and the trust we put within each other. But we ran into an occasion or two where probably there was one aspect of a client's expectations that maybe Bayshore Solutions may have been better at, but there was another aspect that maybe Spinutech would have been better at. And there's a couple opportunities like, well, how bad do you want this, or how good do you think you're really going to win this one versus we did? And we had some conversations, and then at some point we said we should bid on that. Maybe we bid on this together, and it
Mm.
started to open in the door. Are we better to go in as partners? Or are we better to go in as one brand to go try to earn this business? And we were looking at really to be an end-to-end digital agency. There are so many different service levels in an end-to-end agency, and both of us could check some boxes with big checks, some with small checks, some maybe with some aspirational checks. But if we looked at our companies together, there's a lot of really big checks with very little aspirational checks in it, each bringing some different strengths across the end-to-end digital footprint. And we actually had a very large prospect, a couple $1 million project. Pre-merger, we were able to earn an end-to-end solution on that. We were already in merger conversations. We already had planned a merger, but it was such a validation to get a seven-figure project literally weeks before merging that just was a validation that we really were going to build. And our vision really, Peter, is we're going to build a better agency, and a better agency through three stakeholders' views: our clients, our coworkers, and our company shareholders. I can go into detail about what that meant, but as we really were trying to figure out what are two independent agencies we're capable of in a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year window, or maybe what this one unified company could do in a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year window. We looked at the different scenarios there, and we both
Yeah.
aligned that the combined entities, 1, 3 year, and 5 year picture, look more attractive to us, what we thought from the viewpoint from our clients, what we thought from the viewpoint from our coworkers, and then what we thought from the viewpoint of our company shareholders.
Indeed. And you shared with me this wasn't just you and Mark in a dark room creating a master plan of merger. Your leadership teams were also interacting with each other.
Yes, there was an example a year earlier where I had met another agency in one of our other agency forum, the Digital Mastermind, where I had gone and visited with their company, and met their entire leadership team. They had come to Florida and visited with our whole leadership team. We both practiced traction. We let those other agency owners sitting in our leadership L10 traction meeting, vice versa. We were able to do the same. And I had asked Mark, hey, we're getting such a good value of our time learning and growing with each other. Would you ever be open to our leadership teams having the same opportunity to learn from? And so we both agreed that we thought that was an opportunity. We didn't think that the risk was large and the opportunity it was. And
Yeah.
so we did establish that, and immediately we heard from both leadership teams about, wow, they've accomplished this. Wow, they've accomplished that. Wow, they've already figured this out. And then we went like, they're so smart, they're so nice. Like, we kept hearing that. One Friday night, we let this happen, and I don't know, it's probably 7:30 my time. I'm driving home, and it's like, what did you hear? What did you hear? And it was like everything we heard was the teams were really enjoying the interaction, and it really is like, my gosh, one of the hardest parts about merging is the culture side, and our leadership teams are finishing each other's sentences and wanting to spend more time together. That felt like another reason why to consider the larger, bigger picture of a merge.
Yeah, I mean it's a wonderful outcome for you as owners to have your team thrive with another team around, and not posturing and getting true value in it from the cultural interaction. Did you ever have a tone of Spinutech acquiring Bayshore or vice versa, or was it always merger?
Great question. I don't think we ever thought of as one acquiring the other. I think
Yeah,
we really viewed it as we have two great companies that maybe could even build one greater company. I don't think either one of us were interested in an exit. I don't think either one of us had accomplished what we wanted to do with our businesses. But I think we thought there was an opportunity to expand what we could do with one unified business than maybe we could do as two independent partners supporting each other. But it really never got down to an acquisition of one versus the other because I think both of us still had a lot of fuel in the tank, a lot of visions of where we could go, and just was do we want to continue to do this independently or do we want to join forces and see if there's an opportunity to accomplish more of what we want to do in a shorter window than it would be to do it independently.
You had a longer dating period, but a very fast wedding. So I talked about not needing an LOI or memorandum of understanding to get this started. You had already shared information for years. You built the
Right.
relationship, a ritual of communication. Your leadership teams had interacted, and then it was like, okay, we're going to do this. Do you
Yes.
remember when you made that decision and you said you're going to move forward?
Yeah, we probably had less than a 90-day, from the time we formal before we went to conceptualize and say, listen, like you really want to take a run at this. Like you said, we'd seen each other's financials monthly for probably a year and a quarter, if not longer. So we've already been seeing each other's financials monthly. Our leadership teams have already met. We've known each other, very well with, multiple meetings a month and things of that nature. And so we get down to we know each other's numbers already. We know each other's culture already. But we don't know how we want to structure the deal. And so we went instead of an LOI, we just decided that we'd go straight into what it looked like from a rolled up company and bypass that. Not that I don't think that that's important. It's just with a lot of the groundwork already done, we felt comfortable. We were pretty aligned on how we wanted to value each other's businesses and how we're going to merge into it. And then it was just getting into the formality side of this is what, let's run the valuations. Where does this size up when the two entities are rolled up together? We're creating a new company. There's new operating agreements. There's new, all kinds of new agreements. What's the language that those things are going to say? But because the unintentional spending time to each other ended up in potentially doing a merger, a lot of the assessment of the business and due diligence was already acquired in just a long time we'd been together.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Due diligence is your in-depth understanding of the business, and you two had had kind of an open dialogue and communication, which helps quite a bit. Had you done a valuation before on a business that you owned? Was this your first time interacting at that level?
I had done one on Bayshore just because I had done a buyout of some original investors when we had a run at taking the company public when the Nasdaq was on fire and the dot-com run. And so I had bought out my original investors just a few years before the merger. I think it was 2018, and we merged January 1st of 2021. And so I did have a formal valuation done by a private equity company that my investors had introduced me to years earlier, and so we had gone through a formal paid for valuation just a couple years earlier on the Bayshore side. But part of the curriculum that we had at YPO is just valuing your agency and how valuations were done as years go on too. And so we had been comparing just some of the curriculum that we were getting, what that might look like that way. So I think yes, I had done it years before. Obviously, it doesn't take long for a market to change on how things are valued, and so we continued to. Part of the curriculum, at least once a year, was the value of your agency at the YPO perspective when we bring experts in there, and so we continued to kind of have an understanding where it might be if and when we ever were considered a need to know that information.
Yeah, it's great. So you and Mark both had the perspective of kind of like a present value of the business.
Yes.
He had also other people and stakeholders in the
Yes.
company, so his cap table looked differently than yours. When it came to, okay, we're going to merge these businesses together, how did you think through that equity value?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we each determined each other's evaluations. The companies were a little bit different in revenue and earnings, and we came to an understanding of how those two different size organizations should be valued. It wasn't the same valuation criteria for each, as there was different sizes of each company, and so we were able to both understand why the valuation should have a different metric to it and agree to that. And so we ran through that, and then we aligned on how we wanted the partnership to be distributed amongst what was going to be four shareholders, and we're able to work through all of that. And so that wasn't too difficult to be able to work toward. It wasn't too difficult to be able to. It really wasn't difficult. It wasn't an argument. I think we agreed to the principle of what we were doing, and that we let the numbers flush into the principle. And no one objected to what that equation ended up look like when you run the numbers through to what we principally agreed to.
Great. So you come to an agreement of like the formula, how we're going to go value the businesses. And then the shakeout of that is how it's going to look like when these two companies together. You also did something. Neither of you had separate parties. You had a single party.
We
Maybe
did
talk about that too, because that's also
one investment advisor and one lawyer, both representing both parties at one time, which is probably not very frequent. But I would say I don't regret any of it. I think we got great investment advice. I think we got great legal advice. We're all advised at the same thing at the same time. It helped expedite the transaction time. It helped reduce the transaction cost. And again, we had known each other so long. I don't know if we needed the independent. I think if we had independent counselors, they probably would have been trying to do their job for the independent clients that they had hired, but probably would have been creating more noise than was necessary when there was already such an aligned understanding of what this was going to be. Doing their job, I think they just would have been asking a lot of questions that would have just created time, created cost, and quite honestly may have created frustration for the transaction. Because at the end of the day, as you know, you're trying to run your business at the same time as you go through these transactions, and you got pressure
yeah.
to run your own business. And as you get challenged with the deal fatigue versus running my business, we avoided some of what deal fatigue could be, and that would be the feedback coming from the advisors and asking a bunch of questions that upsets the other party. And we
Yeah,
were
the
able,
position is this is how your future business partner is looking to screw you.
right,
That's
exactly,
the tone of the council.
right,
That's the
right. So when it gets received that
this is
way,
how
it's like,
you're not going to get paid. This is how you're not getting. This is how they're
yeah.
going to screw you. You're not going to have any control. They start from that position, then work towards the middle.
So, we were able to get past all that. And I don't know if we had gone the other way where it would have been, but I think it would have created a lot of frustration and friction because they were trying to do what you just mentioned, but we already were past that. We already knew
Yeah.
what we thought, what the end game looked like. And I'm glad we didn't have to go through that part of it because I think it would have created frustration and friction on both sides, and it wasn't necessary.
When I had asked you from lessons learned and things that you did well, of course, and things that you learned from that experience, you stressed reading like operating agreements closely, specific clauses, understanding employment expectations. Like there's a lot of things when you're going from running an established business on your own to now putting two businesses together that you have to document.
Yes.
For the listener who's never experienced that before, walk them through those component parts and how important they really are.
Yeah, I think a lot of agency owners who started their business and don't have any partners probably don't have an operating agreement. They're running the business as they see how they want it run to day. But if you're going to merge your business, with another agency, you've got to align on how you're going to run it, and it probably needs to be documented in the form of an operating agreement, employment agreement, things of that nature. And the intent is there's no is that you're fully setting expectations with each other and how that's going to work. And if you don't have that experience before, you're going to want to get it because you're really writing the rules of how you're going to run the business going forward. And most agencies didn't have to have one prior to having any M&A activity. I had one in my past because I had business partners and we had operating agreements and employment agreements. So I was familiar with that. We had bank covenants and all that type of stuff. And so I understood what that looked like. We did acquire a couple companies over the course of time. But I think the majority of independent owning agencies who don't have partners or go through M&A don't have that right now.
Yeah.
And they're going to not be able to run the business the way they were before, most likely in a new partnership. And most of that probably should be covered in an employment agreement and operating agreement. And Peter, you're an expert on the M&A side of things, but I do like to look at opportunities for potential acquisitions to help complement the Spinutech side of things. And I get these pro formas and I look at what adjusted EBITDA is on some of these things that come across my desk, and I'm like, what isn't this agency running personally through their business? Because their adjusted EBITDA is more than their operating expenses, it seems like. And, when you go into a new partnership, you're probably not going to be able to do that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And so you just have to understand some of these things that you're used to running an independent agency probably go away when you're in a partnership. And those things should be spelled out real well in a mutually understood, operating agreement, employment agreement, things of that nature. But the freedom of making decisions on your own, there's probably minimized to some degree. And it's important to understand what you may be walking away from. Fortunately for me and for my partner, Mark, neither of us really ran anything personally through our businesses. We both ran very just business only books and records.
Prudent.
So we didn't have any challenge with any of that. But I find way too many agency peers of mine who go through that don't realize some of the things that they've been accustomed to are no longer on the table, and it impacts income taxes, things of that nature.
Yeah, it changes their relationship with the business.
It does.
And if they didn't anticipate that, that could lead to some friction at home. That could
At home.
lead to some changes of quality of life or standard of living. And these are all
Lifestyle.
things that, unless you're running a business with the financial rigor of a business, of a corporation, it's really hard to put two of those businesses together. You had this approach of 1 + 1 = 11, not just 1 + 1 = 3. Most listeners who are considering merging, it's also because they're looking at the treatment of the EBITDA, the earnings at the
Yes.
bigger size and scale.
Yes.
And so how much did that play a role? Because a lot of what you described was, I think of it as adding more value to the clients, creating more professional development opportunities for your team,
Yes.
going to market with a more comprehensive offering that can satisfy that market's needs. That's how you described a lot of it. But from a founder and stakeholder perspective, a lot of your benefit is also in the earnings treatment at a bigger scale when prospective buyers are knocking at your door. Because you and Mark probably had a bunch of people knocking at your door over the years anyway. You're prominent in your markets. You're at a size where someone's thinking of acquiring you.
Of course.
You had done your own acquisitions, and every acquisition you announced leads to someone paying attention to you a little bit more.
Right.
So how much did that feed into the discussion? Maybe not like a significant amount, but how much of that was there?
It was a factor of the decision, but I think first and foremost, you just have to run a great company, and that starts with your clients and your coworkers, right? And the primary driver of the merger was creating a better end-to-end services for our clients, but secondarily, also equally, creating more career paths for our coworkers. And
Yeah.
by being able to check more of the end-to-end digital services with a bigger Sharpie, so to speak, and being able to create more career paths for our coworkers, you only believe the agency is going to be more successful because the clients are finding more reasons to do business with your agency and expanding more services. Your
Yep.
coworkers are finding more career opportunities if they didn't like the one that they were in. So that in of itself, you knew you were building a better agency. As we all know, the higher EBITDA gets, generally the higher the multiple gets too, and the combination of the two instead of the two independents, certainly at some kind of transaction time down the road would probably have some accretive value as well. But the primary goal was creating a better agency, and that was as an end-to-end agency. We thought we were, definitely think we're differentiating ourselves. There's not too many agencies our size who can be truly good at end-to-end digital services, and we're both good at what we were doing before, great in some areas and good at some others, but we became great in all areas. And that just really helped our clients be more successful and our coworkers find more reasons why they want to stay here because we're providing more learning and growth opportunities for them as well.
Yeah, wonderful. The secret to creating a valuable asset is to create a valuable asset.
Right, exactly.
And that's the team and clients. You're tracking annually via YPO's ritual of enterprise value, which I always ask people, are you tracking? Most aren't. You were tracking them independently. It helped you in approaching the merger with a agreed upon formula. Did the enterprise value change? Because you're now still tracking it internally, Kevin. So you both had this separate enterprise value. You put two businesses together. How much did it change?
It probably took us over a point of where valuation criteria has the next threshold of having a good next kick. And so I think you should look at different stages of where companies are valued. Sure, the higher number, sometimes there's a kicker here and then there's a kicker there. And so it definitely catapulted us into the next framework of where there was next, and so that just the higher combination helped, but I think it got us into another kicker of where things are looked at from a different lens too, and helped amplify that as well.
Yeah, let's touch on some of those discount factor resolutions, right? It's not just tiers. You had redundancy of key person risk because you had two leadership teams.
Right.
So you have redundancy of capability. Although you did different things at different levels, you did have overlap of capability and team.
Yeah.
And so you have all of this kind of robust infrastructure, all things that make the business more durable.
Yes.
Did you feel it more durable? Like, did it feel stronger in your mind once you merged?
Yeah, I remember, Peter. This wasn't even. We merged January 1st of 2021. It wasn't the end of February 2021 when I remember one of our skill areas say, "My gosh, we are a much stronger integrated team today," and it was so validating to hear this group say that. But they definitely recognized where the different trainings had gotten skill set growth in different areas. But this was a very front leading practice area within an organization. When I heard them say, we are definitely a stronger practice area combined today, and that's within 60 days of merger. Like those are the things that those give you the chill factor. It just it
Yeah.
felt great. You could feel the pride in themselves, and they all knew. Again, this was about coworker growth, and they're all learning that they had opportunities to learn from each other. But now our clients were even going to get better implementations than ever before.
Yeah. Did you feel like you're also able to compete at a higher level? Or,
For
okay,
sure. Yeah.
touch on that a little bit, because that's another important part about merging.
Again, I think one of the brand promises I think we deliver here well at Spinutech is we really can be a brand's end-to-end agency. And often, that means, they may be using a web partner, there may be a paid media partner, a digital marketing partner, there could be a separate web hosting company. Spinutech offers all of that under one roof with a proven methodology, the same people who do it day in, day out with each other. And when you talk to brands who are working with a independent web agency, independent maybe digital marketing company or fragmented digital marketing services, maybe even a different hosting company, when it gets to getting things done that touches all digital touch points, it's not using the same people in the same processes. Sometimes one company's services overlap another and they're competing for that business. They fight for it. It's definitely not very fluent. And at Spinutech, we were able to always offer that at Bayshore Solutions too. But now we had a bigger, more robust team to be able to do this end-to-end digital under one roof with one methodology and be able to demonstrate how this chain of digital marketing under one roof can really work, and how our best case studies are clients who embrace us for all their digital, both web and digital marketing,
Yeah.
because we're using the same team. And they're not having to trust other agencies who really don't want to work together. They're just forced to because they've been engaged by that brand.
Yeah.
And often, those other agencies, want to get the business away from the other agencies. So they try to make them fail so they can try to go get that business. It doesn't help the brand, but it does help that agency. And so you have those conversations with brands like, gosh, we're so refreshed to have one agency partner. It's getting work done more efficiently, quickly, more correctly, more cost effectively. And the campaign results are way better.
Did anything change in the KPIs going from a 60-person team at Bayshore to, what was it, 150 plus as the newly designed Spinutech? Like, what did you have to change in the business to measure the things that were important and to manage that new size and scale?
I think KPIs are always an evolving thing for us. I think we're always looking to understand where the industry is benchmarking and how we want to be able to compete, whether it be net promoter score, internal team member promoter score, whether it be, maybe how we evaluate revenue growth or gross profit margin or EBITDA or utilization. Or I think we always look at those KPIs and see where the industry's at, because I would say a year in digital is equal to a decade in many other industries. So there isn't a whole lot of set and forget when it comes to KPIs. And so we're always looking to see how can we have a value at Spinutech, get better every day. I think our KPIs are looking how we get better every day, providing value to our clients, becoming a rewarding workplace for our coworkers, and looking to see how we can have a good set of metrics that we measure and evaluate our performance as an agency as well. So there wasn't anything intentionally done because we merged to change things. I think we had to align on what the benchmark was. And then I think year over year, through programs that you facilitate and others, we continue to look to see. We do benchmark ourselves in a couple different formats of how we compare to to other agencies. So there's a couple organizations that we get benchmark data, one on a monthly basis, the other every 6 months. We look at that and how it's client engagement, client growth. We look at coworker compensation. We look at net promoter score, revenue, earnings, all that type of stuff. But we benchmark ourselves monthly with one organization and every 6 months with another. And our goal is to make sure we're doing the best we possibly can for our clients, the most rewarding place for our coworkers, and we're doing a good job running the agency as well.
Right. And I want to kind of like get to the end with a really important change of events when you merge. When it was your business and you bought out the business partners and you have control, you did acquisitions, the control and liquidity things are all within your grasp.
Yes.
And so you're in control and you dictate what happens with the earnings and the profits of the business. Now you've merged together and you are building a habit of making decisions as a company, what to do with the profits that are generated.
Yes.
What lessons can you share with the listener who is evaluating a merger like this, when you start getting kind of a profit first mindset for shareholders. Like when
Yeah.
you're running your own business, you may not have that same level of emphasis, but when you have a table of stakeholders now, you're measuring the bottom line quite differently. You're distributing those profits differently, and there's more meaningful profits because now you're a bigger organization potentially. So guide the listener through that thinking, kind of the rituals, how you approach it, how the discussion worked for you at Spinutech.
Yeah, in our experience, and I think at the advice of our advisors too, that was something that we discussed prior to merger and how we would facilitate that through an operating agreement. So there wasn't a lot of subjectivity down the road or maybe misalignment down the road. That was something that with the advisors, those were important things to flush out. And going back to some of our conversations earlier about if you're considering, merging and you're not used to having an employment agreement or an operating agreement or what you're going to do with these things that independently you've been able to make these decisions on your own. I think
Yeah.
those are the important things that you do want to flush out before so there's no surprises later. And so we did it in advance. I'm going to tell you that I was the architect of that idea. My partner Mark was the architect of that idea. I think we had good advisors who explained to us that, really to do this correctly, while you guys are, good friends and YPO forum mates and all those types of things, you really want to make sure you're dotting these I's and crossing these T's. And yes, this agreement's 45 pages and blah, da, 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 but, really to do it correctly, you want to be able to work through all of this so you don't have any unanswered questions down the road that maybe you'd have a different perspective at a later point. And so, again, with great advisors, we were able to learn that that's what you wanted to do on the front end, and we got that done on the front end. And so, all those rules are written up front, and we just live by those rules as we continue to operate the business.
Great. And some of those rules, just for the listeners not familiar with it, could be frequency of distributions, the amount of working capital that's available through excess cash that's injected back to the business. The common one in my operating agreements is 70 to 80% of profits are distributed. The rest is assumed to be reinvested. And then, of course, there's discretion based upon the performance of the business at a quarterly, annually, whatever the cadence is that you're administrating the company. Those are similar types of things.
Yes.
Then in regards to who has decision-making power, what can be given to certain roles and responsibilities. That's the employee agreements that have within it some spending power, some authority, some range, and some other things that require the vote of the ownership to be on board
Right.
with at certain percentages. So there's a bunch of these little details. And the advice I always give to people is imagine 3 years from now, you've already merged. The company tanked 40% because of a black swan event like COVID.
Yeah.
And you're scrambling. Is this a person that you want to be next to when you're scrambling to figure out how to survive and continue to thrive in a version of the business? And what kind of constraints or what kind of rules do you want to approach that game with? That's the level of thinking that goes into these operating agreements. What happens if one of you passes away? What happens if one of you gets
Sick.
seriously ill and can no
Or
longer work in the business? What if you gets tired and wants to retire? These are all of the types of considerations that you need to go through and the operating agreement should address.
most definitely. And so, we were again advised to go through all that. And I think part of the advice is I think Peter goes back to our services contracts or our master services agreements that we as agencies have with our clients. The majority of that language is there in case there's a bad day down the road. Most of the time,
Yes.
like anytime like a warning sign is when
Our agreements are not for getting along, it's for when you don't get along.
So I would, you say this was part of a smile, but like when one of my coworkers, hey Kevin, one of our clients had a question on the contract. Usually, it's not that they want to pay us excess over what we've delivered so far. It's usually something that they want to, it's usually they're checking something because I don't know if they feel that they're being correctly served. And so, what you're doing is you're making sure that if there's things that maybe need to be decided, you're deciding them up front and trying to address all that stuff. No different than your services contracts, master services, statements of work. You're doing that to protect all entities. When we put our master services agreement in a client's lap or a statement of work, we intend to make that mutually beneficial. It is not a one-way Spinutech or the highway document. It is a mutually beneficial. Here's what we're doing together. Here's how we work through things. And if there's anything that doesn't go to plan, here's how we address it. And it's the same way with an employment agreement, an operating agreement, whatever that would be. It's just setting the role and expectations. A little more wording and depth than potentially the master services agreement or a statement of work. But the intent is to protect all parties. And it's important that you go through that exercise.
Yeah, wonderful. I am the programmatic M&A guy. My whole thing is you're going to do more and more deals. You did deals at Bayshore and now Spinutech. If I'm listening to this and I'm an agency going, I feel like I'm a great acquisition target for Spinutech, or I'm thinking about doing a similar step as merging with a counterpart or a friendly competitor. What advice do you take internally to yourself when you evaluate opportunities? And what would you recommend to that founder who's thinking about merging?
Yes, I think first of all, there's an old saying in advertising: start with the end in mind. So, what is your end goal, and then what's your gap to get to that goal, and what are different paths, or what we say in our what's your roadmap to get to that goal, right? And so, Peter, I applaud you. You've helped a lot of people be able to get closer to their goal throughout. And there's organic growth, there's M&A growth, there's mergers. There's a right path for everybody, and that path isn't consistent for all people's and what they want at the end of the game and where they're currently at. But I do agree with you, and I tease you sometimes. I think you say sometimes say something like "M&A cures all problems." I understand where that saying comes from, and it certainly can be an exponential way to be able to help someone accomplish what their end game is. And you just want to do it, with a good plan in place and good advisors around you. And whether that's through acquiring, being acquired, merging, there's great use cases for all those are appropriate. But I think getting educated is most important. Where do you want to go? Where are you currently at? And what are the current roadmaps that could get you there? Either doing acquisitions yourself, being acquired, doing a merger, all have different risk rewards to all of them. And you have to be able to evaluate where you are in that risk reward platform. And none of them are guaranteed. And so, there's, just I think the biggest part of that is really understanding where you're at, where you want to go, and being around some really good advisors so you don't figure it out by yourself.
I think the last statement I think we should leave the audience with is a thing you told me in our prep call and things that I've heard you say when we spent time together, which is it's not been easy, but it's been worth it.
Yeah, I would say my exact phrase. I said this every day. When I look back at this merger, I have zero regrets. I think it was a great thing for both companies. Doesn't mean every day was a walk in the park, but it wouldn't have been a walk in the park as independent companies either. But at the end of the day, we fulfilled what we set out to do. We've created a better agency for our clients. We've created a better agency for our coworkers. We created a better agency for our shareholders. And independently, we wouldn't be able to provide the services we do today for our clients. We wouldn't be able to provide the career paths we have for our coworkers and be able to provide some of the opportunities that we've been brought into that we aspire to that we probably wouldn't have been able to have a seat at the table as two independent companies. And I'm thrilled to know that we were able to come together, put together this great company and enjoy the journey it is as a larger enterprise than it would have been still trying to have some of these opportunities as two smaller ones.
Fantastic. What a great way to end it. If someone wants to reach out to you, Kevin, what's the best way to do it?
Kevin@spinutech.com.
Kevin, my friend, thank you so much. A wealth of knowledge and a great example for the industry.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Hey,
If you like this episode, probably like one of our other episodes. Click here.